Thank you for joining me today with Beyond Imagination with Cheryl Bryan. I am excited for all that God's up to these days, and it truly is beyond imagination. And how many of you have really, really great imaginations? If I was asking that question, I was out there, I would not have my hand in the air. I'm not one that has a huge imagination, but God has taken me already beyond my own imagination in many, many settings. And today I just want to join you and share a few of the times that I've had extreme situations that God showed up for me in amazing, amazing ways. And I've mentioned before in other podcasts about God telling me about wanting me to walk the journey of walking like Enoch walked. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't understand that. And he said, you just trust me, yield yourself and believe. Nothing is impossible for those that believe. And so I want to encourage you along your journey that you can let go and believe God at deeper levels. Let go and trust Him for things that go beyond your imagination. A lot of times as Christians, or even pre-Christians, we'll put God in a little box and say, this is who He is. Well, He's a lot bigger than we understand. He told me one time, Cheryl, I'm going to kick the ins and the sides out of that box you try to keep me in. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, if I'm trying to keep in a box, what are some of my friends doing? You know, I kind of felt like I try to kick the ins and the sides out of the box myself. But how many of you have God in this little box and you think this is who He is, this is what He'll do? Well, reality is He wants to go way beyond that. He wants to take you on a journey of intimacy and a journey of fellowship, a journey of friendship, where He talks to you and He tells you things. And let me take you back about 25 years when we first got to the Church of Glad Tidings and my children were young. And one night I heard God speak to me and He said, Cheryl, you're not supposed to go in the car tomorrow, and your husband should not be going to Mexico on that trip either. Well, I was going to be in a car with several of my friends going to Oregon and going to stay there for several days. I think we were skiing. I can't even remember what the detail was, just going out of the area. And God told me, no, you're not supposed to be doing that. And I told my husband the next morning when we woke up, I said, honey, God doesn't want you to go on this trip, this Mexico trip you're going on, and He doesn't want me in the car on the way to Oregon at all. And Dave looked at me and he said, Cheryl, why didn't you tell me this earlier, how you're feeling about this? And I said, it's not me feeling it. It's something I just heard God say last night late. He told me, don't go in that car, and your husband shouldn't be going to Mexico either. Well, typically, Dave would have probably ended up in Mexico because he hears God for himself. I don't tell him what God says. But in this situation, he actually called Lou Benninger and said, I feel like my wife's feeling like I should stay home. I better just stay here. And that isn't a typical response that he would have, but he did in that setting. And I called the girls I was going to be in the car with and said, I have to stay home. I'm not supposed to go on the trip. I'm sorry. Well, 2 hours down the road, there was a head-on collision, and it killed the driver of the other car. And the girl in my car, the baby in my car, actually ended up paraplegic. Very, very devastating accident. I was going to have my 2-year-old son in the car with me, and we had just moved from Washington, and I was kind of anti-seatbelt. So my baby, 2-year-old baby, would have been thrown from the car unquestionably. But God, in His mercy, spoke to me, and I didn't lose my son at that point, though I do believe that's what would have happened had I been in that car. And it was quite a devastating accident. And my husband needed to be here at the church so that he could go up and be a part of the hospital and the care for the women that were in the accident. And so it was one of those times of God teaching me, hear my voice and do what I say when it makes no sense, when it doesn't matter. And you think you've got a plan, back out of your plan and yield. And I hadn't always heard God that clearly. And God is wanting to take me on this journey and you on this journey of hearing His voice. And He's saying, come and listen. Come and sit a while with me. Come and listen to me. And oftentimes in our spiritual journey, we do all the talking. And God is like, will you be still? Just be still and learn to listen and learn to obey and learn to do whatever I'm wanting you to do in those situations. And so that was a major learning lesson for me. I was like, oh, I need to be very careful of the little voice that tells me, don't go. You shouldn't be in that car. He shouldn't be here. And so Dave and I have had a journey of hearing the voice of God and listening and obeying. And God's taken that beyond imagination. And let me tell you what I mean when I say that. I've heard the voice of God in some settings where people don't like what I've heard. They don't like that I heard this. And so, understanding who we are, we believe in miracles, we believe in healing, we believe in the presence of God. And Grandpa was A.A. Allen, Grandpa was a faith miracle worker. And so I grew up absolutely believing cancer is of the enemy and we fight against it, we destroy it, and it is not going to have any part in those that we love. We fight it and win. That's the will of God. And sometimes we win those battles and sometimes we don't, but it's our intention to fight and win every time. And along my journey, one time my husband told me my brother and sister-in-law wanted me to come over, wanted us two to come over and pray for her. And she had heard that she had a minor cancer. It wasn't something that was huge. It was just something that they could operate on and it would be gone. But she said, will you guys please come and pray for me? We said, absolutely. Let's go pray. And so we went over there to pray. And as we were praying for my sister-in-law, I was listening to my husband as he was praying along. All of a sudden, the voice of God shows up and tells me in my insides. And so when I say the voice of God, it is an internal voice, but it's internal audible. I can hear it as clear as I could hear, like people will say, how do you know it was God? Or how do you know that was Jesus? Oftentimes, it's because of the person that he uses. And I can explain a couple of those little things here. But God, in this situation, it was Father God, and he spoke to me and he said, Julia is going to die of this cancer, and your brother Steve will marry Kelly. And I was so shocked. And we were in the middle of my brother praying for Julie, and Julie didn't have a cancer that would typically kill you. It was a minor cancer. And so I didn't know what to do. And so my brother got done praying, and I kind of like hum-hawed around, and I started in and just said, God, I know that you love Julia. I know that you hate cancer. And I know that you absolutely love her. And, I did a not like my normal prayer. Normally, I would take authority over cancer and say, Cancer, you don't have any right in Julia. You get out of here. You wither and die. And I would come with a very authoritative voice against cancer. And in that setting, I had just heard God tell me she is going to die of this cancer and your brother will marry this other woman. And so I was struggling to figure this out because I'd never had something like that happen before. And so in that very setting, as that was happening, I'm doing my best to pray, but don't have authority to go after that cancer because of what I just heard. I just didn't know what to do. And when I got done praying, my sister-in-law said to me, you don't believe God is going to heal me. Well, I didn't want to tell her what I had heard. So what I said was, Julia, I know that God loves you and he adores you. And I know you love him. And I know you hate cancer and he hates cancer. And so I don't think I have the authority to tell him what to do here. I do have the authority to step in and tell, cancer that it's already a defeated enemy and some of those things. But I didn't pray like I normally would pray. Well, Julia felt bad about it. And she said, I honestly don't want people here that are not really fully believing that I'm about to be healed. And I felt bad, but I didn't know what to do. And I just said, I love you. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, I know God hates cancer. I know he loves you. So I was hum-hawing around, but I already heard from God what was going to happen. And so I tried to remove myself from the situation and just tell her, I love you and we got to run. And so in the car, my husband said, what was that? And I said, honey, God told me she's going to go to heaven and my brother is going to marry this woman. Well, that was outside of our understanding because we believe in divine healing. We don't believe in knowing that someone is going to be taken to heaven. We believe in divine healing. But in this particular situation, God stepped in and said, no, this is what's going to happen. And when I looked back at it, well, Dave told me in the car, he said, honey, I don't want you ever telling anyone that because we need to pray for God to heal her. And I said, honey, I know, but I'm just telling you what I heard him say. Well, 2 years later, she did die of that cancer. And my brother said, I'll never remarry. That's not what I'm going to do. I actually am happy to be a single father. I have a little 12-year-old girl and his older kids were older and he had a baby that was 12 by then. And he just said, I'm not going to ever remarry. Well, a year down the road, he called me one day and he said, Cheryl, I need to talk to you. What do you know about Kelly Daniels? And I thought, oh dear, here we go. And he said, can I come over to your house and talk to you? And he said, is that who you think I'm going to marry? Because he knew I thought he would remarry one day. And I said, Steve, I can't tell you that. Blah, blah, blah. Went through this whole thing with him. And in the end, he married Kelly Daniel. I told him, be careful, take it slow and easy. It's your second marriage. So you'll want to be careful. Well, that night he asked her after a hamburger if she would marry him. Well, she'd already seen their wedding on the platform when we dedicated our big building. So God had showed her way before that she would marry this man. And he showed me what would happen. So God is wanting to take us beyond our imagination into the realm of the spirit so we know where things are going and what's going to happen. And for me, I would have spent lots and lots of time praying for my sister-in-law. But God told me early, right then, this is where this is going. This is what's going to happen. And I believe God wants all of us to have a connection with him where we hear exactly where we're supposed to go, what's going to happen. And then we don't waste a lot of time praying in arenas that are not what's going to happen anyway. And I had another situation happen that's very similar to that, where God spoke to me and said, stop praying about this. That's not what's going to happen. So I'll tell you about that as well. And again, this might be outside your imagination, but like my friend David Hogan says all the time, he said, I may be outside your mind, but I'm not outside my mind. I'm outside of what you imagine right now, but I know what God is up to. And so for me, the next situation was quite an interesting one. It was about 5 years before Obama took office, and I was getting on an airplane one time, and as I got on the airplane, I was 17 days into a water fast, and God had spoke to me about water fasting, and he told me, Cheryl, share the journey of water fasting, and I'll do that on another podcast, but he said, share it because I need my people to fast. I need my people to go after the kingdom in that way and lay down all the dirt world stuff. And so I was 17 days on a journey of water fasting, heading up to share at a conference. And as I sat down on the airplane, a man sat down next to me. Well, there was a seat in between. He sat down. He was an elder gentleman and very sweet man. Sat down real quietly and he looked over at me and he said, would you like to know who the Antichrist is? And I looked at him like, oh my goodness. So I said something like, sure, shoot, go for it. I didn't think he really knew. I just thought, this is crazy. So he said, I'll share with you. And so I looked over at him and he said, the next president of the United States will be the Antichrist, and his name is Barack Hussein Obama. Well, I thought it was hilarious. I didn't even didn't cross my mind much. I just think I put it in my yellow notepad. Watch for a man named Barack Hussein Obama. If he enters the political scene, whatever. And so then he told me, be careful what you read and a couple little things like that. And then he went sound asleep, and we didn't talk anymore for that journey. And I went up, spoke at the ladies' conference, got home, told my husband, I said, honey, guess what the man on the airplane said to me? And he said, what? And I said, well, he said, do you want to know who the Antichrist is? And I said, sure, shoot. And he said, his name is Barack Hussein Obama, and he will be the next president of the United States. So it may have been just after the last president was elected. I can't remember the exact timing when that happened, but my husband always says, Cheryl, it wasn't that far after 9/11, and I was quite certain there was no chance of that happening. So when I told my husband, he's like, Cheryl, there's zero chance that he's going to become the next president. First off, the United States will never vote in a Muslim as the president of the United States because we're a Christian nation. And I said, well, all I'm telling you is what the man on the airplane said. And he said, well, obviously that's ridiculous. And I said, I know, but let's just leave that alone. And so we went on about life, and about 3 years down the road, or a couple of years down the road, my husband came home from work one day and he said, Cheryl, do you remember the name of the man that they said was going to be the Antichrist, that would be the next president? And I said, I'm not sure, but I probably wrote it in my yellow notes. And he said, well, was it Barack Hussein Obama? And I said, yes, it was. Absolutely it was. I pulled it up. I'm like, yeah, that's the name. And he said, well, he's running for president. And I thought, oh no, that's terrible. So I was on my journey of getting up at 4 a.m. and spending time with God, which was such a beautiful, amazing journey. And at 4 a.m, I'd be praying, God, please don't allow an evil man to be our president. If he's evil at any level, don't allow an evil man to be our president, let alone the Antichrist. I don't want him to be our president for sure. So I was just praying, and God was speaking to me one morning. Jesus came and he sat down beside me on the fireplace hearth, and I didn't see him, but I felt him. He came in, he just joined me, sat there, and he said, you need to stop wasting your time praying that this won't happen. If you were alive when I was being crucified, you would have thrown yourself in the way of the cross. This too must happen. And I was so surprised. I thought, oh no. And he said, don't waste your time. No more wasting time. You're wasting your energy. He has to become the president. And so I told my husband, and he said, Cheryl, don't tell people that because they'll all quit praying. And I'm like, honey, no, God told me he absolutely would be our next president. So it was probably still a year till the elections took place. And we were up in Bethel the night of the elections at the church up there. And everybody was praying, of course, that Obama would not win. And that night, they announced that he won that night as we were going to bed. And it was devastating for a lot of people, but God had already shown me this must happen. And so I just went to bed and thought, God, we're on this journey. We'll see what life looks like down the road. And here we are down the road, and it looks a lot different than it used to. But God has a bigger plan. And so the next morning, I was in my car and I was coming back to Yuba City. And as I'm coming back to Yuba City, I hear God yell into my vehicle. And he yells these words. He yells, your redemption draws nigh. Your redemption draws nigh. Your redemption draws nigh. He yelled it 5 times, and it was loud and reverberating. And I thought, I don't even know what that really means. And so I called my husband, and he said, I said, honey, I don't know what's going on. God yelled into the car just now. And Dave said, Cheryl, would I have heard it if I was in the car? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, what did he say? And I said, he yelled, my redemption draws nigh. He said, your redemption draws nigh. Your redemption draws nigh. Your redemption draws nigh. And Dave said, I said, what does that mean? I don't really know what that means. And he said, well, Cheryl, it's this verse. It's the end of this verse. It says, when all these things take place, don't fear, look up. Your redemption draws nigh. And so as I heard that, I thought, oh my goodness, this was about the man that the man on the airplane said was going to be the Antichrist. And now God is telling me, first off, Jesus takes the analogy of this must happen, just like I had to die on the cross. So that was a very clear analogy to really salvation, redemption versus the Antichrist. So intense. And then he yells into my car, your redemption draws nigh. Don't worry. When all these things take place, don't fear, but look up, your redemption draws nigh. And we are living in the days that it's very important that we look up. We don't look around. We don't hold on to the dirt world, but we say, God, take me above, take me into your heart. Let me hear your voice. Let me know what you're saying. Because if we're not careful, we become fearful. And reality is, God is wanting to talk to us, and he's wanting us to walk like Enoch. He's wanting us to hear his voice. And as we hear his voice, we'll know the things that are coming down the road, and we won't be fearful. We'll be able to help people through the journey, and we'll be able to say, nope, this is going to happen, but it's okay. It's part of the journey. This is the way to walk. Walk circumspectly, walk with your heart aligned with heaven, giving yourself fully, fully to him, delighting in him, and saying, God, I want to be really one that is yielded at the deepest level. So thank you, thank you, thank you that you can take full control of my life. You can really, this is all about that place of abiding. It's the place of not fearing, but looking up and saying, God, you're my redeemer. You're the redeemer of all of mankind. So let me yield myself to you. And let me completely and totally trust you in the middle of whatever situations we find ourselves in. And we're living in some crazy, crazy days, but it's exciting because our redemption draws nigh, and there's no question about it. And as we are redeemed, body, soul, and spirit, we are going to see the beyond imagination. The taste of the things that are of the age to come will manifest in and through our lives regularly. It's quite exciting. So I'm excited that you are here with me today. And the description below has ways to connect. And I just want to bless you and I hope to see you again soon.